Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As we have watched Republicans vote to kill a January 6th commission, pursue the slow motion insurrection in the states over the last few weeks, I have had a few occasions to think about Mike Pence, of the hang Mike Pence chant. What does he make of all this? Because let's remember the role that Pence played that fateful day in the history of American democracy. And I suppose we should start with credit where it is due. When the time came, Mike Pence, in his ministerial role as the vice president presiding over the counting of electoral votes, did not choose to throw in his lot with an attempted coup and kill off 220 years of the American democratic experiment. So, I guess, nice job, Mike Pence. But for being unwilling to do so, of course, he was the target of Donald Trump's ire. And I think you could make a plausible case that Donald Trump, in word and in action, put Mike Pence in physical danger that day. In a speech shortly before Pence was due to certify President-elect Joe Biden's Electoral College win, Donald Trump said this.
I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. And if he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
After that, he encouraged his supporters to head down to the Capitol because, quote, you don't concede when there is theft involved. And his supporters did just that, eventually, of course, violently storming the Capitol. At one point, then Vice President Mike Pence and his family were whisked out of the Senate chamber by security to a secure location by Secret Service. Minutes later, Trump essentially put a target on Pence's back to his rabid followers. This is after this has all happened, right? People are already starting to storm. And Trump tweets, quote, Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution. This is happening while the rioters were literally roaming the halls of the Capitol, many of them chanting, hang Mike Pence and bring out Pence, while rioters outside had set up a makeshift gallows in the field near the Capitol. So not only were the rioters literally calling for Mike Pence's murder, they had set up the structure to carry it out. Perhaps Pence was thinking about this at the time, or perhaps he was thinking about how, leading up to January 6th, Trump reportedly told him, quote, you can either go down in history as a patriot or you can go down in history as a pussy. Putting all of that aside, putting aside how one feels about whether we should or should not continue American democratic self-governance in which the people choose their leaders as opposed to having their leaders just choose to stay in power by themselves. I mean, I have strong feelings about that. I imagine most of you do too. But putting that aside, okay, at a personal level, it's a pretty messed up thing when your boss tries to get you killed, which is more or less what happened on January 6th. So, I have always been curious as to how Mike Pence was going to respond to that. Because when it comes to Trump, we have watched, of course, Republican after Republican bow and scrape, bend the knee, give away their personal dignity in the most humiliating, cowardly, excruciating way possible. I mean, the two big examples that come to mind, and there are really countless, are Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. During the 2016 campaign, Lindsey Graham had called Trump a nut job and a loser and yada, yada, yada before he took on the role of Trump's golf caddy in the U.S. Senate. Donald Trump personally insulted Senator Ted Cruz's wife in 2016. Ted Cruz stood before the cameras with lots of umbrage and anger. And after losing a primary to him, Ted Cruz turned around and phone banked for him. And since then, he's done nothing but kiss up to the man. Sorry, Heidi. That has been the pattern. Now, politicians tend to be people with pretty big egos. They tend to be people who care at some level about how they are perceived. But they are also people who are pursuing power. And so we keep seeing this almost Shakespearean test for politicians, particularly in the modern Republican Party, which is what matters more, your pursuit of power or your own basic dignity? Ask yourself, what if Donald Trump just told everyone in the Senate to crawl around like a dog and bark if the bone they were promised was proximity to power? I gotta think they would do it. I can almost hear the arfs, arfs coming from Ted Cruz's mouth. Now, the person whose literal safety and the safety of his family, to be clear, was threatened by Donald Trump is Mike Pence. And yesterday, Mike Pence spoke at a Republican dinner in New Hampshire where he addressed the attack on the Capitol and finally mustered up the courage to stand up for himself against his former boss a little.
January 6th was a dark day in the history of the United States Capitol. But thanks to the swift action of the Capitol Police and federal law enforcement, violence was quelled. The Capitol was secured. And that same day, we reconvened the Congress and did our duty under the Constitution and the laws of the United States. You know, President Trump and I have spoken many times since we left office. And I don't know if we'll ever see eye to eye on that day. But I will always be proud of what we accomplished for the American people over the last 4 years.
Okay, there's a lot there, like several weeks worth of therapy sessions, really. But a couple things. Did you see how clearly Mike Pence meant for the "we did our duty under the Constitution" to be an applause line, and it just gets nothing? Silence. Because him doing his duty was the whole problem. That's the thing they hate. But that was Mike Pence's heroic stand. I may never see eye to eye with Trump about hanging Mike Pence. Agree to disagree. Still really proud, though. Now, the process by which free governments and free people collapse into dictatorships and authoritarianism is a source of endless historical study and comparative political analysis. Something I read about a lot. I'm pretty interested in it for obvious reasons. And we know that there are regimes after regimes that wield the power of the state in horrific ways, and that force upon people compromises for their own survival and the survival of their families. Here's a recent example, just in the last few days. This is Belarusian dissident Roman Protasevich, who was essentially kidnapped off a commercial flight last month. Yesterday, an interview with him was posted online. It is excruciating to watch. Really, really, really hard to watch. He essentially praised Belarus's authoritarian president on state TV. If you look closely, it appears his face is caked in makeup to cover bruises. God knows what this man has been subjected to. I mean, they scrambled a fighter jet to force an EU plane to land to get him. And yet here he is, this man, praising his captor, the man that sent a fighter jet to intercept his plane. It's a literal hostage video. And that's the evil of authoritarian regimes, documented by authors and thinkers and dissidents, country after country, decade after decade. That's how they break the dignity of their subjects, using violence and torture and threats to family and secret police and surveillance and coercion. What is crazy to watch is people who face none of that. Absolutely none of it. People like Mike Pence. And still, they give up their own dignity willingly. They voluntarily trade it for power. And in the midst of this selfish pursuit, they are also trading away something special to all Americans, which is our own collective freedom. And that threatens all of us.